Let me just start by saying that these videos are never easy for me to make. I don't want to hurt people's feelings. This channel's supposed to be about empowerment. It's not about breaking people down. But, and there's always a but, isn't there? There are certain behaviors, certain human behaviors that are maladaptive in nature. The particular behavior and label that I'm going to take aim at today is perfectionism. The label that people give themselves as perfectionists, I don't like either of them. See, my biggest problem with perfectionism and the perfectionist label is that it has nothing to do with perfect. And this is a difficult thing to unpack, but basically what people think perfect is has nothing to do with perfectionism. Perfect has more in common with complete than it does with flawless. Perfectionism is all about flawlessness, and that doesn't exist. That's what makes perfectionism maladaptive. Any kind of behavior, any kind of drive that pushes people toward flawlessness as a goal clearly doesn't have realistic outcomes in mind. And that's why I keep labeling perfectionism as maladaptive. What makes it even worse is that it keeps a person from realizing their full potential. Perfectionism is how insecure people hide their fears. That's probably not going to go over well with people who consider themselves perfectionists. You're going to hear that statement and immediately start looking for the exit. But it's true. Nothing says insecurity to me more than somebody claiming to be a perfectionist. I know that that person is leaning on that label in order to protect their vanity. Not their ego, mind you, but their vanity. Perfectionism is a way to shield a shaky self-image. And just to double down on the idea that perfectionism is so maladaptive as to be completely avoided, it's also the perfect gateway into developing imposter syndrome. That's going to be a topic for another day. Today I just want to address perfectionism. Perfectionism is a barrier to success. All of the perfectionists I know or have dealt with historically were not successful people. I did some checking before making this video. They're still not successful. It's the kind of label that makes you feel better about failure. And it's also the kind of label that makes you feel better about not growing as a person. And that's why, generally speaking, you find that a lot more mediocre people, not the high performers, are claiming to be perfectionists. The high performers, generally speaking, they're going to choose done over perfect. It's the perfectionists who never seem to accomplish anything. That's telling. Successful people almost never self-select as perfectionists. But the irony of that is that the people that don't describe themselves as perfectionists tend to achieve perfect, or better yet, perfection in their work product, because they aren't dwelling on something that doesn't exist, which is flawlessness. This is where I stated earlier that perfect generally means complete, and complete means accomplished. Perfectionism means flawlessness, and you can't achieve that. And that's the key to not being a perfectionist. If you want to accomplish things, if you want to create, you have to just do those things and then move forward. Perfectionism doesn't allow you to do that. It's the equivalent of a fixed mindset. Whereas people who avoid the state of perfectionism, generally speaking, have a growth mindset. And they demonstrate that with their work product and accomplishments. Perfectionists, in a cruel twist of fate, often stagnate. And in an even crueler twist of fate, they often don't produce anything of note. It's one of the reasons why when I was a supervisor and I used to interview employees for positions, I wouldn't hire anybody that self-identified as a perfectionist. I need people that can get things done, not hide behind some label and accomplish nothing. If that statement came out during an interview, it was an automatic strike. I would move on to the next candidate. I'm also not the only supervisor who thought that. It was something that we discussed behind closed doors, and it was something that came up quite often. This idea that people think being a perfectionist is good. It's not. It's like telling people that you're busy all the time. At a certain point, busy isn't an accolade. It makes it seem like you're incompetent and can't get things done. Whenever a person told me that they were really busy, I always said, you're probably a perfectionist, aren't you? And they almost always affirmed what I suspected, that they describe themselves as perfectionists. Perfectionists are always complaining about how busy they are, and they're almost never producing anything of worth. If you look at the idea of something being perfect, it has a lot more in common with something being completed and appreciated. Perfectionism isn't that. When somebody brings up perfectionism to me, most of the time what I think of is unfulfilled dreams and unaccomplished tasks. Worse than both of those though, I also associate perfectionism with deep insecurities that person needs to unpack so that they can move forward with their lives. As labels go, being a perfectionist is one of the worst. It's not a compliment when it comes from others, and it's not a label you should self-select. Perfectionism is a trap. Perfectionism is also a lie we tell ourselves. Let's not do that.